Hi, welcome back. This is Mark, and today we're going to set up basic server services in Packet Tracer. To illustrate that, we're going to need two computers connected to a server. We're just going to use a very simple network connection with two computers, a switch, and a server. So under services of the server, these are the following that we're going to use. So the first one is we're going to use the HTTP. Okay. So this is the service when a computer connects to the HTTP server. Okay. Next is we're going to use the DNS. Okay. Because here the HTTP, we're going to demonstrate it by accessing the HTTP server using an IP address. The next step is we're going to use the DNS. Now here, instead of typing the IP address to connect to the HTTP service, we're just going to We're just going to use the name. Okay. Instead of, say for example, instead of 192.168.1.100, we're just gonna type the name of the domain. Say for example, wemsu.edu.ph, okay, or yahoo.com. Okay, so something like that. And then after the DNS, we're also going to set up the FTP or File Transfer Protocol. So this protocol is used to log in to a server remotely, okay, to use the services such as transferring files. But we're not going to actually transfer files. I'm just gonna show you how we are able to log in remotely to the server using the FTP or the File Transfer Protocol. And finally, we're going to use the DHCP. So here, these PCs, instead of being set up manually with IP addresses, they will now automatically generate their own IP address by connecting to this server. Okay, so again, we're gonna do the HTTP. Next is the DNS, to be followed by the FTP, and to be followed by the DHCP. Okay, so those are just some of the server services, and just to show you how client or a PC workstation can connect to server with just a simple connection and connected to the switch. Okay, to do that, so let's try to set this up first with an IP address. So to do that, I'm gonna label this 168. Say for example 10.1. This one is 10.2. These are just labels, so we're going to configure this later. So this is the server. So to configure it, we go to the desktop and then put the IP address, subnet mask, and then no need yet for the default gateway or the DNS server, because we're just going to set up the first three services. So this is 192.168.10.2 subnet mask, and there. For the server, we also need to set that up because they're connected to the network. It has its own IP address also. So this one, it has to be as labeled. It's going to be 100. So subnet mask there. So we're going to connect them now with a straight through connection. And this one also Okay, let's wait for them to turn to green, and then let's try to ping them to connect, to test the connectivity. Okay, now so they're all green. Let's try to ping. Use the ping utility command prompt, and then let's ping the server. So that's 192.168 ping 192.168.1.100. Did we do it right? Sorry, that was supposed to be 10, that's why it's timed out. Okay, so this is to be 10. There, we have a reply. Let's try the other desktop. Same process, command prompt ping 192.168.1.10 rather, that 100. Okay. So there's a reply. So we have a connectivity or a connection with the server. Now let's do the first service. So services, after clicking the server and then services, then let's do the HTTP. So here in the HTTP, the server is by default it's on. So let's try to, so that means if we access this, the HTTP server using the web server of the PCs, we're gonna be able to connect. So how do we do that? Let's click this PC and then click the web browser, and then we're going to type now the 192.168.1. the IP address of the server, so 100. Okay, we did not have that. Why? Because we're typing the wrong IP address again. There. So this is, we have now, we are now able to connect to the web, okay, using the IP address. So this is the content of the web browser. So small page, back. This is a demonstration on how the web server works. So let's try to edit this in the web server, this page. Going back here, and then we're now here in HTTP, and then let's try to edit the index. So welcome to my page. Quick link, hello world, welcome to my page, opening doors. So it's not going to be Cisco anymore, but this text is going to show. Save, and then let's try the other file. Hello world, this one, hello world, let's edit this. Hello world, I am just planning to edit this page in Packet Tracer. So I think that's it, just to show you that you can do that here in Packet Tracer. So let's try to do that already. Okay, so going back to the PC, any of the PC, then web browser, then we type the URL, which is the IP address 192.168.10.set 10.100. Yeah. So here, welcome to my page. This is not Cisco anymore. Okay, we did not change this. What we changed was this one, this part here, my page. Then when I click the small page, sorry, this is not the one. Oh, this one. Sorry. So we did it. Yeah, this was the one that we edited. Hi, I am just trying to edit this page in Packet Tracer. So there you go. That's using HTTP service in the server. Okay, so this is just a demo, so this is not the whole the part where we try to edit most of the files in the HTTP server. So that's, of course, this has to be turned on for that to work. Next part is the DNS server. Okay, so in the DNS server, DNS stands for domain name service. So here in the DNS server, you don't have to type anymore. Instead of typing in the web browser, instead of typing the 192.168.100.1, this will already work if 192.168.100. Sorry, that has to be 10.100. We don't have to type the IP address, but just the name itself, depending on what name we assign. So say, for example, we assign here my own page.com. Okay, so that is how DNS works. It maps the name to the IP address. So let's do that here. So let's go back to the server. So let's click on DNS. So as you can see, DNS is turned off. So now we're going to turn this on. Okay, so say, for example, mypage.com, and then we now type the IP address, which is this 192.168. The server IP address 10.100. Okay, and then add. There you go. So instead now of typing the IP address, we're just going to use the mypage.com. So be sure that this is turned on, and then click on save, and then this should appear here on the table below. So we have that configured in the server. Now we also need to configure in the IP configuration the DNS, because that is where we're going to look for the domain name system. Okay, so what's the DNS server? This is now the address of the DNS server, the 192.168.10.100. Same, we're going to do that to the other computer, There you go. So let's try it. Web browser. Now, what are we supposed to type? We're supposed to type the name, mypage.com. There. So we were now able to access it by not typing the IP address itself, 192.168.1.10.100, but the name. So which was the one that we assigned, mypage.com. Okay. So here. So that is how a domain name system works, or the DNS server service works. So this one is DNS. Next one is the FTP. So the FTP is remotely logging into the server with this type of protocol for transferring files. So how do we do that? It has to be configured first in the server. So you have to add a user. So for example, FTP, it is by default turned on. So we're going to add a user here. Say, for example, user, sample user. Password is password. And these are the permissions that the server or the administrator in the server can give to this user, the sample user. So write means the user can modify, okay? Modify the file, read, delete, rename, and list. So if you check all of this, he has all the permissions. Now to go on with that, the last step is to click on add. Okay, so remember sample user and password. So that means if I log in using this or this, I would be able to log in because I already have the account here in the server. So say for example that here. So we use the command prompt. So the command is FTP or file transfer protocol, and then the IP address, which is the server's address 192.168.10.100. So it will now ask for the credentials if that's in the server. So our username is sample user, password is password. Okay, we are now logged in. So we can now use commands in FTP. We can now transfer files. That's doing that here in 10.1. How about here in 10.2? Let's try that. It should work also. Okay, so FTP 192.168.10.100. Again, sample user, and then password. There. So we are now successfully logged into the server, and we can use the services using the FTP or file transfer protocol. Okay, so we are now done with the HTTP, we're done with the DNS and the FTP, and lastly is using the DHCP, this one, DHCP. So here in the DHCP, it is by default turned off so that we can set up the IP addresses manually. But if we turn this on, this should be, and then turn on also the DHCP of the client computers, they should be able to get addresses from, request addresses from the server. So let's do that. Let's modify this. So turn this on, and then we're just going to, we don't need this yet because we're not going to use the default gateway. We're not going to use a router, but just to demonstrate the use of the HCP is we're instead, remember this is 10.1, let's have this starting in 50. So 50, the start IP address is going to be 50.1. So any of this should have 50.1 and then 50.2. So maximum number of users by default is 512. We can still edit this. So this is the maximum. So we can just also set this. Say for example, you're going to limit into 10 users only. You can set that into 10. And then let's click save. Here you have, it should start with 50.1 and then maximum user is 10. Okay, so this is on, and let's try that. So for that to work, we have to IP address, go to IP address, and then now this is now static. We're now going to use the DHCP. Requesting IP address. Let's see what happens. Let's do that again. It's not working. It's 169. Let's try to check our server configuration with the DHCP. Server pool default gateway 50.1. Sorry, because okay, our address is since our IP address here is 10.1, remember 10.200, 10.100, it should also be 10. So since we use the 5 there, this has also to be 5. Okay, we're going to use this type of network. So it has to be consistent. Okay, it's either we change this here or we change on the server side. Okay, on the DHCP. So let's do it here first. So since we use the 5, so in the DHCP configuration here, since we use this, so we're just going to adjust this part here, which is the 5 of the IP address of the server. Okay, so let's try that again. IP configuration, now it's successful. So it started with 5.1. Let's check our server again where it started 5.1 services, DHCP. Okay, it started with 0 because it's 0 here. So let's try to have it start at 50. Okay, and save it there. So it should be 192.168. It should start with 50. 5.50. Okay. Static and then DHCP. So now it started with 50. Same thing for this. Static. This should be, what do you think should this be when we click on DHCP? This should be 50.1. 51, I'm sorry, 51. 5.51. So DHCP. So this is not anymore an static, but this is already DHCP. DHCP configured. Okay. Because you cannot use identical. So there. So this is now, I think what we used was 192.168.5. 5.100. Is that the correct one? Yeah, 5. So there you go. We have configured the DHCP. Now, you might ask, sir, what's the use of using DHCP? This is very useful, especially if you have a lot of computers in a workplace and you don't need to configure them manually with IP addresses. So you can just configure them to have it in a DHCP configuration, so that when you turn on those computers, they will request for an IP address from the server, and then the server will give them the IP addresses. Okay, so the DHCP is going to take care of the assigning of the IP addresses to these computers automatically. As an IT administrator, this is very, very useful if you have a lot of computers in the network, so you don't have to configure all of those computers one by one with individual IP addresses. And to give a recap of what we did, we had setup of H services, packet tracer services, or server services using packet tracer. What we did was using the HTTP first. Next is the DNS, the main name service. Next is FTP, and finally we use the DHCP or Dynamic Host Control Protocol. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you so much for your time. Have a nice day. Bye.